Now with a panel that includes experienced neighbors, those who are living and leading in communities close to plant and operating radioactive waste facilities. Managing radioactive waste is not new in our country. Some communities have decades of experience as hosts to facilities where radioactive waste is stored today. Let's hear what it's like to live alongside a waste storage facility and what leaders in these regions are considering for their communities' futures. I'll begin by introducing Sue Dion. Sue was elected mayor of Deep River in December 2018. Born and raised in Milton, Ontario, she's a graduate of the University of Waterloo with a Bachelor in Environmental Studies in Urban and Regional Planning. So Sue, in addition to the work that she has done for the Ministry of Natural Resources, as well as she was site planner at Chalk River Laboratories, and she worked there for 21 years, excuse me. So Sue also served on several years with the Can-Do Swim Club and coached junior curling, amongst her many other volunteer roles in her community. In her free time, you can often find her swimming at the pool, downhill skiing, or cycling. Our other panelist with us today is Eadie. Born in Kincardine, a beautiful lakeshore community in Bruce County, Anne was raised on her parents' dairy farm near Ripley. She attended Western University, and she returned to Kincardine to teach school and once again became involved in farming after she married her husband, Doug. After 25 years of teaching, Anne decided to enter politics as a councillor in the township of Huron-Kinloss. And when she moved back to Kincardine in 2010, she became deputy mayor, and now she's in her second terms of mayor as the municipality of Kincardine. And amongst her many accomplishments, Anne is also the policy chair for planning and economic development, the vice chair of the Grey Bruce Health Unit, and a board member of the Nuclear Innovation Institute. So thank you both for joining me today. We will, if Mayor Foster is able to join us, some of you who were in the last session would have seen his little video. He is the mayor of Clarington and the chair of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities. So thank you both, Anne and Sue, for joining me today. And this panel will be a little bit different. We're gonna have more of a conversation roundtable style. Feel free to post your questions under the Engage tab at any time. And so I'm gonna start by asking a question that came to my mind after I heard some of the feedback yesterday from the breakout sessions. So my first question to both of you is, what role do you think municipalities should have in long-term waste management? And perhaps I'll start with Mayor Eadie.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now? Okay, good. Maybe I have our perspective here in the municipality of Kincardine, but I think municipalities and communities can be advocates for the benefits of nuclear power with its clean energy, medical isotopes, etc. And then that leads to supporting the whole nuclear cycle. I think that's one of the key things that maybe in the municipality of Kincardine, having both Bruce Power and the Western OPG's Western Waste Management Facility, plus many supply chain companies here, we're more aware of the whole cycle of nuclear and to have all the benefits of nuclear than being part of the long-term waste management. It has to happen. And so For us in the municipality of Kincardine, we've been the interim host community for nuclear waste for more than 50 years. And now the original reactor, Douglas Point, is in the decommissioning stage. It was kind of deferred decommissioning, I think they call it. So we probably will be into the future. We're neighbors with South Bruce, which is in the process with Ignis. But that's one thing that we would like the guiding principles. We've talked about this as a council. We'd like the guiding principles and integrated strategy to consider the important role that interim host communities have in the storage of radioactive waste, as well as decommissioning. So we would like to be considered as part of a longer term solution to store the waste within its boundaries. We have good, we have such a long history with nuclear, and we think it needs to be recognized, even if it has to have, if there need to be some legislative requirements. I think that's important, whether you're a short-term interim host or a long-term interim host like us, and as well as the communities that are going to be the, whether it's Ignis or South Bruce or other places that are going to have the DGRs, the deep geological repositories. So I think it's very important to support nuclear with the issues of climate change. And so if our role is in the long-term management of waste, we're classified as interim right now, but by the time something gets built, it's going to probably be a few decades yet. So that's what I'm thinking, and our municipality is thinking that as well. A lot of us.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mayor Dion. So, what role do you think municipalities should have in long-term waste management?
I think municipalities, whatever type of waste, be it radioactive waste or pulp and paper waste, or the oil and gas industry waste, or just conventional landfill waste, we all have a role in insisting that the waste management processes that are used in storage or disposal sites are informed based on the best science possible, given the relative risks and consequences of that waste. So we need to make sure that decisions around waste are science-based and not alarmist or scare tactic based. And so that's an important aspect that I think I and my council consider when we're looking into radioactive waste or any type of waste that is of concern to us. Just like any municipality, we consider what's upstream and upwind from us, and so we want to make sure everything that is as safe as possible. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask you perhaps a little more provocative question. What are the biggest issues that you hear from your constituents when you start talking, or what that they raise about radioactive waste? So perhaps we'll start with Mayor Dion this time.
Okay. I think the biggest issue for us in the Ottawa Valley is the time it's taking to get the NSDF facility built and the existing low-level waste at the Chalk River Laboratories properly disposed of, so that renewal and remediation of the Chalk River site can be completed. The town of Deep River is the birthplace of nuclear power in Canada. We've been around 75 years last year, and the Chalk River site, of course, has been around that entire time. So there is some legacy waste there, and it's important for us in the Ottawa Valley and for all residents and for the staff, I'm sure, at CNL to make sure that the waste that's there is properly disposed of. And so that's certainly an important factor to our municipality and to many of our residents.
Now, and I'll pass it over. Before I pass it over to Mayor Eadie, I do have a follow-up question for Mayor Dion. I happen to live in Ottawa, which you might not have known. Okay. So I'm quite aware of the concern that's been raised downstream from Chalk River about the NSDF. And is there anything that that you want to address regarding, you know, the fear that people who live on the Ottawa River have regarding that facility?
Sure. And I know it's been in the media recently because the city of Ottawa is currently considering it at council. To be frank, the low-level material that is 90% of it sitting at the Chalk River site now consists primarily of building components like drywall and wood and concrete and things like that. They're sitting basically in the open. They may contain very low levels of radioactive components. The project sees them going into an engineered landfill with both a barrier and a cap of multiple layers of protection from both clay natural membranes and geotextile membranes that have been tested and analyzed for earthquake and long-term viability. And recent testing has shown it to be 500 years of solid protection. And certainly the radioactivity, low levels in that type of material is very short-lived, and the landfill site will long also has a liquid waste and treatment in it. And so the risk to the public is almost so small that it's ridiculously negligible. And yet we have 2 or 3 very vocal people concerned with it, and they have made a career calling of being alarmist and raising basically speaking rhetoric such as witches brew and things like that around that waste. And it's irresponsible because these people are given access to all the information that is available on that, just as I am. And just to be alarmist and be concerned at the lowest, 1 in 100 million risk an isotope is going to get out. And yet all around us, we've got the waste from the petrochemical industry, which is contaminating our atmosphere and changing our climate, which is the real risk to humanity. And so frankly, it's something that it's easier to scare people. It's much harder to unscare them. And so that's the work of NRCan and people like us is to unscare people. Thanks.
And I see that we have the honor of having Mayor Foster join us. So Adrian Foster is the mayor of Clarington. He is serving his 3rd term, no less. And he's, as I mentioned earlier, he's also the chair of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities. You may have seen his promotional video at other times during the summit during our breaks. So welcome, Mayor Foster. I jumped into your role. And
thank you.
And the question that we're entertaining right now is, what is the biggest concern that you hear from your constituents with respect to radioactive waste? And I'll turn that over to you.
So, Karine, honestly, we've of course got the dry fuel storage, the used bundles down at Darlington Nuclear. More recently, and a few years ago, there was more concern over Port Granby, which is part of the Port Hope Area Initiative. I would suggest that very few concerns on that. So the community was highly engaged as that project started. It is near the end of the project. CNL did a phenomenal job in terms of getting out to the community, listening to the community's concerns, addressing them, and I think we're where we're at today because of the work that was done on that. But we don't generally hear a lot of concern from the community.
Thank you very much. How about you, Mayor Eadie? Any concerns coming, or what are the predominant concerns that you hear from your constituents?
I would say we're like Clarington to a certain degree, because overall there's a very high level of support for nuclear in the municipality of Kincardine, and about a third of the Bruce Power workers do live in the municipality of Kincardine, and then a lot of the OPG workers, and they work at the Western Waste Management Facility, which is on the Bruce site. So their families in the municipality of Kincardine, we're a small municipality, so often if you don't have somebody that's in the nuclear industry in your family, you have a relative or a neighbor or a friend. So we're very familiar with nuclear and the levels. People understand the levels of nuclear waste better, I think, low level, intermediate level, and spent fuel. And I think that's a big help. The one exception we did have was when we were going through the process for OPG's DGR, and we had the joint review panels. It really focused attention on the waste issue. And we had a lot of people coming and voicing their concerns. But when I looked at the people in a small community, quite a few people, there were mainly people from outside our municipality. And I see a lot of the same people when I go to the CNSC, or I was on a call with, the IJC, the International Joint Commission with the Great Lakes, something like that. And I would say the polling that took place when the municipality of Kincardine decided to join the DGR process for intermediate and low-level waste showed the majority supported the DGR even. Some just said, well, why do we need a DGR for low-level waste? Because it's so stored so safely above ground already. And, there's backup to a backup, and it's monitored. And after a few decades, we're finding out it can just go to a regular landfill. Not all of it, but quite a few. They monitor it all the time. So I don't. There's a few exceptions. We did have a few local people that were at the joint review panel, which was over the course of 2 years, around 2013. But I would say we've lived with it all these years, and I think everybody's very comfortable with the level of vigilance and safety. So there's the odd exception. I think one of the biggest things with our constituents and with our surrounding neighbors was they've been hearing with all the public input about the low and intermediate level DGR. And then in 2010, when our neighbors and all of our neighbors went in the process pretty well in Bruce County, they went in the process for the spent fuel DGR, the NWMO process. And then people were getting confused and thought that maybe ours was for spent fuel. So other than that, I don't hear too much, really, the concerns.
Thank you. So perhaps we're already running short on time. So perhaps I'll ask one last question. We'll start with Mayor Foster this time. what would you say to a community that is considering becoming a facility where radioactive waste might be stored? And that's whether it's for fuel or low or intermediate level waste. What would you say would be the biggest advantage for that community, or what would be the biggest disadvantage? So Mayor Foster, over to you.
So, and my task has been really onerous. I've been with you for 10 minutes by the time I finally got on. My apologies for that. So the advice I would give for any community looking is, ask the questions, do the research, and sometimes it's difficult for us to accept answers. And in Clarington, we've got the Port Granby, which is historic low-level waste that had to be moved. And more safely stored, very active. Immediately east of us is Port Hope. That has probably the most intrusive cleanup and how they're dealing with that and the public. And then, of course, to the west of us, we've got Pickering, which will be decommissioned, and of course, the draw fuel storage there, as well as here. So there is a learning curve. There is consultation to be done, but lots of good information. And I'll go back to our experience with Port Granby, where residents' questions were dealt with. They were answered. A phenomenal job was done with that. On the economic side, and again, I'll go back to Port Granby just because that's the freshest in our mind. The outreach to the community, the outreach to the business community was significant and was incredibly well done. So there is economic activity. There are benefits beyond that. The potential downside, and Sue spoke to it a little bit, will come around the individuals that want to raise fear and concern that need not exist. And certainly in Port Hope's case, there is an individual from Australia that was causing a lot of issues. So the people in Port Hope generally quite happy, and we're hearing from a lot of external sources, the problems that the community was having. Listen to the community. So you've got to manage the message both ways, and you've got to deal with the community appropriately.
Thank you. And I'll ask Mayor Dion if she wants to add anything to that. Biggest advantage, disadvantages for any community considering becoming or keeping the waste long term?
I'll just try and add perspective because I agree with most of what Mayor Foster said. For Deep River, we're like any single industry municipality. We kind of owe our existence to the nuclear industry. And so where we can properly and safely do so, I believe we should take care of our waste. That said, we need to do our research as was said earlier, and any other community should inform themselves and make sure that the proponents are following the science and the best science available, and the consequences match. And so that's really important, I think. And we need to make sure that we're not setting policy for radioactive waste, having it set for us by alarmists, and that we really make sure that we do follow the science. In fact, in Canada, we are very fortunate to have one of the world's top nuclear regulators. And so certainly for any community that might be looking at becoming either a nuclear community or hosting waste, for us to sort of rely on that credibility and the extremely robust process and of the CNSC is sort of an extra level of assurance that we're doing things safely and well. I think I would like to say there's, any federal review of waste policy, in my estimation, kind of needs to look at the entire picture, including the benefits of the energy sector and not just the waste. And you know, I see on the NRCan website coal labeled as clean coal, and yet nuclear is not labeled as clean or green. And so I really think that if coal can be labeled as clean, then nuclear can certainly be labeled as clean and green. And so we could maybe start with our policy for radioactive waste by relabeling NRCan's website as such. And really, there's a role for all of us and for the federal government and the regulator. I think, well, not the regulator, their role is to regulate, but to certainly show the entire picture of the energy sector, and that we are not, it's not only the waste, because there's huge benefit to nuclear technology, both for climate and for medical. So, you know, I wouldn't be afraid of it. I think any community should just educate themselves well. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll give the final response over to Mayor Eadie.
Well, I agree with both Adrian and Sue. Learning about the science and the safety, how safe all aspects of nuclear are and how well regulated. I think one of the things that I've learned over the years that people are concerned about is the environment and the safety, that the safety measures are there for the environment, especially for us. So whatever watershed you're in, or of course, we're right on Lake Huron. We have the beautiful Saugeen Valley watershed. And I think people wanted assurance that they had to learn that whole process. And that's important to learn so that everybody can be confident that there are rules and regulations, and that your water will be protected. And so I always said, when we were under the OPG DGR process, we love our lake. We've asked tons of questions. Assure us of the safety and the science, that our Lake Huron will still provide us not only with recreation, entertainment, beautiful sunsets, but water. We take our water out of Lake Huron. So whatever community that is looking at the process, that's what they need to look at, and they have to understand, as I've discovered in nuclear, they're always using advanced technology and looking at a backup to a backup to a backup. They have brilliant minds working on all aspects of the safety and regulations. So, and the biggest advantage, of course, it always adds to, gives people jobs. Your young people, whether it's in generation or different supply chain companies, etc. It's a chance, especially in rural communities like ours, and Sue's is more rural, for people to continue to stay in their rural communities and have a great quality of life. So that's all I can add. I agree.
Thank you very much, Mayor Eadie. And I'd like to take the time for thanking the three of you for joining us. I know you all have busy schedules,